when Karen from the HOA forced 3 mysterious trucks onto Tom's property without permission. She thought she was untouchable. But when he locked the gates and called the sheriff, he uncovered a $2,400,000 fraud, a web of lies, and sparked a takedown no one saw coming.
When I first bought the place, I thought I'd finally found my little slice of peace. A 3-car garage, decent-sized lot, no HOA nonsense, and enough room to run a small auto repair shop from home if I ever wanted to semi-retire from the chaos of the dealership world. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. The house sat just on the edge of a neighborhood run by one of those obsessive homeowners associations. But the deed was crystal clear. My lot was outside their jurisdiction. No dues, no rule book, no pastel-colored threats in the mailbox. I liked it that way. I moved in mid-June, just before the 4th of July. The garage was my priority. I spent the first week installing a new hydraulic lift, epoxy, coating the floors, and wiring in smart controls for the security gate and doors. It was the kind of setup I'd dreamed of since wrenching on engines as a teenager under a leaking tarp. On the 3rd day, she appeared. I was halfway into adjusting the alignment of the main garage door motor when I heard heels clicking on my driveway. Not the kind of shoes you expect on gravel. I looked up to see a woman in her late 40s, blonde bob, perfectly ironed white slacks, clipboard tucked under one arm like a badge of authority. She walked like she owned the pavement. "Hello, you must be Mr. Becker," she said with a politician's smile. "I'm Karen Brady, president of the Glendale Meadows HOA. I just wanted to formally welcome you to the community." I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped down off the ladder. "Appreciate it, but I'm not actually part of the HOA. My property's outside the zone." She laughed in a way that didn't feel casual. "Oh, well, you're still adjacent, so we consider everyone here part of the family. Besides, consistency is key to property values, don't you think?" She handed me a glossy folder titled Community Guidelines, Pride Through Unity. "Yeah, I'll pass," I said, handing it right back. "My deed's not part of the association. I checked it 3 times before signing." Her smile thinned, but she didn't miss a beat. "Well, of course. But, you know, many non-members still choose to voluntarily follow our aesthetic suggestions. It's about harmony, after all. We wouldn't want your garage, say, clashing with the neighborhood's character." I looked behind her toward the rows of beige, taupe, and faint green boxes pretending to be houses, every one of them with the same welcome flag and the same landscaping. Then I looked back at my deep gray brick and custom matte black steel garage door. "I think we'll survive the clash," I said, not unkindly. She took a breath through her nose. "Actually, while I'm here, we're finalizing plans for our 4th of July community parade. We'll be using floats this year, so we're coordinating temporary storage space. And it just so happens your garage would be ideal for—" "Absolutely not," I interrupted. "No offense, but that's my personal shop. I don't rent it out, not for storage, and not for parade floats." Her smile cracked a little. "It would just be for a few days. And of course, the HOA would—" "No." She blinked. The silence stretched just a second longer than comfortable. Then she shifted tactics. "Well, you're new. I understand. But I do hope you'll think about being a good neighbor. These kinds of favors build goodwill." "I'm neighborly," I said, "but not when people try to borrow my house without asking." With that, I turned and went back to adjusting the motor. She didn't leave right away. I could hear her shoes shifting on the gravel, probably calculating whether to push again. But eventually, She clicked her way back down the drive and disappeared. Over the next few days, I noticed a few things. First, I started getting more waves from people I'd never met, always accompanied by that tight, performative smile. Second, my trash can got knocked over twice in 1 week. And third, a drone hovered around my garage windows one evening before buzzing back toward the HOA neighborhood. On July 1st, I came home to find a glossy flyer taped to my front gate. It was an announcement for the community parade, listing sponsors and supporters. And there, in bold letters near the bottom, special thanks to Thomas Becker for offering temporary garage space for our event floats. I stood there for a full minute, reading that line 3 times. Then I tore the flyer down, pulled out my phone, and opened my security app. The gate schedule was set to manual lock. From now on, no more open gates, no more assuming good intentions. They'd tried to steamroll me politely. Now I was curious just how far they were willing to go. It started just before sunrise on July 3rd. I was making coffee, still half asleep, when I heard something heavy rumble outside. At first, I thought it was a delivery truck turning around in the cul-de-sac. But the sound didn't leave. It stopped, hissed, and then another engine followed behind it. By the time I looked out the front window, my driveway was blocked. 3 box trucks, big ones, parked bumper to bumper, angled like they'd been shoved in with all the grace of a drunk Tetris player. One of them was backed up so far into my property that it was practically touching the garage door. The other 2 were spread across my driveway, partially on my lawn. No drivers in sight, no note, no warning. I threw on boots and stormed outside, still in my t-shirt and flannel pajama pants, thinking maybe the drivers got the wrong address. But when I got closer, I saw it. One of the rear doors on the truck closest to the garage was slightly open, and inside were a few large crates labeled "Event Supplies" in red stenciled letters. That's when it hit me. This was HOA business. I marched back inside, opened the gate control app, and hit lockdown. Garage doors sealed. Front gate motorized shut. Then I printed a sign in bold red font, "Private property. Trespassing will be prosecuted." Laminated it, posted it on both sides of the fence. Around 10 a.m., guess who showed up? Karen rolled up in her white Mercedes, parked in front of my locked gate, stepped out like she was attending a ribbon-cutting ceremony. She had on oversized sunglasses and that same passive-aggressive smile as before. She didn't even wait for me to come out, just cupped her hands around her mouth and called out across the yard. "Tom, we had to move the trucks in a little early. The float teams were ahead of schedule. Hope you don't mind." I walked to the gate, kept my hands in my pockets, and stared at her through the bars like I was at the zoo. "Karen, I specifically told you I'm not letting anyone store anything in my garage." "Oh, come on," she said, laughing like I was joking. "It's only for 2 days. We'll be in and out before the 5th. We didn't want to bother you with the details. You parked 3 20-foot trucks on my property without permission. That's not a detail." Her smile shrank half an inch. "Technically, only one of them is actually touching your driveway." I pulled out my phone and hit the security camera live feed. "They're all on my property. You want to see the property line overlay? I can project it on your windshield." She took off her sunglasses. "You're really going to make this a thing? You know how this community works. Everyone contributes. And frankly, you've been a little difficult." I didn't say a word, just stared. "You know," she added, "a little cooperation goes a long way. A few of us already saw your flyer spot. People are expecting you to be involved. Pulling out now would look rude." I stepped closer to the gate. "Let me be clear. If those trucks aren't gone by sunset, I'm calling the sheriff." Her face hardened, but she tried to mask it with a chuckle. You wouldn't actually call law enforcement over a simple parking misunderstanding. I will, and I'll have them towed, and I'll bill the HOA for the damage to my lawn. She opened her mouth to say something else, then snapped it shut. Without another word, she turned and got back in her car, tires crunching as she pulled away. I waited until she was gone, then walked back to the garage. One of the trucks was now suspiciously padlocked from the outside with a thick steel chain, clearly not just float decorations. Something didn't add up. I walked the perimeter, took close-up photos of all 3 trucks, including license plates and any visible labels. Then I filed a notice of unauthorized use of property with the county website, just to establish a paper trail. The next morning, things escalated. I woke up to find that someone had put up new laminated signs, printed in the same style as the HOA announcements, and zip-tied them to my fence. They read, "Thank you to Tom Becker for supporting the parade. Float storage provided courtesy of our neighbor." My name was in bold. My address? Publicly thanking me for something I explicitly refused. A manipulation, printed and distributed like a done deal. I tore down every sign. And when I checked the neighborhood's Facebook group, which, yes, of course they had, I found a thread already brewing. Posts like, "Great to see Tom getting involved," and "Knew he'd come around," with little celebratory emojis. Someone even tagged me in a post with a photo of the trucks. I wasn't involved. I wasn't coming around. They were trying to build a narrative around me, one where I was too polite to object or too passive to resist. That was the last straw. I didn't call the sheriff yet, but I updated all my cameras, added motion sensors, and programmed the gate to notify me every time someone got within 5 feet. I wanted a record of everything now. Every truck, every conversation, every zip tie and passive-aggressive smile. Because this wasn't just about trucks anymore. This was control. And Karen was trying to play me like a prop in her HOA theater. She picked the wrong garage. By the afternoon of July 4th, I stopped treating the trucks like an annoyance and started treating them like a problem. Not a parking problem, a "why are you hiding things on my property" problem. The padlock on the nearest truck bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Parade floats don't need chains thick enough to anchor a boat. I spent the morning upgrading my camera coverage. 2 additional motion-triggered units went up along the fence line, one angled directly at the trucks, the other covering the garage doors. I calibrated the sensitivity, just high enough to catch a raccoon, but low enough to ignore blowing leaves. By noon, my phone buzzed every time someone breathed too close to my driveway. That was exactly how I wanted it. The first alert came after sunset. 2 figures approached the trucks just after 9. Hoodies up, heads down, moving like people who didn't want to be remembered. I watched from my phone as they unlocked the rear of the middle truck and slid inside. No flashlights, no talking. They knew where everything was. A few minutes later, they came back out, carrying narrow boxes and what looked like thick folders held tight to their chests. They loaded them into a dark SUV parked just outside the camera's range and drove off without turning on their headlights until they hit the main road. I replayed the footage 3 times. Floats don't get visited at night by people who know the inventory by muscle memory. The next morning, I found something else waiting for me. A folded piece of paper in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just plain white printer paper, creased once, shoved between the bills. Inside, 3 words printed in block letters. "Do not open the trucks." Under that, a second line. "They are dangerous." I stood there longer than I should have, rereading it, checking the mailbox like maybe the paper would explain itself if I stared hard enough. It didn't. No signature, no logo, no handwriting. Whoever left it didn't want to be known. I didn't panic. I don't panic easily. But I did change my approach. Instead of forcing anything open, I inspected what was already accessible. The padlocked truck stayed off-limits. But the one closest to the garage, the one that had been left slightly ajar that first morning, was still unsecured. I didn't step inside. I didn't touch anything. I leaned in just enough to see. File boxes, banker boxes, labeled with dates, project names, and acronyms I recognized from the HOA flyers. Maintenance funds, landscaping contracts, special assessments. All the boring words people use when they don't want questions. I took photos, slow, careful, every label, every serial number on the boxes. Then I backed away and locked the garage again. An hour later, Karen showed up. This time, no smile, no clipboard, just irritation wrapped in entitlement. She stood at the gate like she expected it to apologize for existing. "You need to open the gate," she said. Not asked, ordered. "We have volunteers arriving to decorate the floats." "You need to move your trucks," I replied. "They don't belong here." She leaned closer. "You're being unreasonable. And frankly, you're starting to interfere with HOA property." I laughed once, short, sharp. "Those trucks are on my land. That makes them my problem." Her eyes flicked toward the garage, just for a second, then back to me. "You wouldn't want to get involved in things you don't understand." That did it. "I understand trespassing," I said. "And I understand when someone lies badly. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to remove the trucks, or I'm going to escalate this." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You think calling the police will go your way?" "I think the truth usually does." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned without another word and walked back to her car. That evening, my phone buzzed again. Another alert. But this time, it wasn't motion. It was a message request from a blank profile. No photo. No history. "You're not wrong. She's scared. Watch the trucks. Don't let them leave." I read it twice. Then once more. I didn't reply. I didn't acknowledge it. I just stood in the garage, listening to the low hum of the security system, staring at the silhouettes of those trucks through the tinted windows. Whatever was inside them wasn't meant to see daylight. And someone inside the HOA knew it. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid. I've had worse things in my yard than a few box trucks. But because I couldn't shake the sense that something was about to snap. And I needed to be wide awake when it did. By morning, I'd made my decision. At 8 o'clock sharp, I called the sheriff's office. Not the emergency line, just the direct, non-urgent number. I explained everything as calmly and clearly as I could. Trespassing, unauthorized vehicle storage, suspicious nighttime activity, an anonymous warning that suggested criminal activity might be involved. The dispatcher didn't scoff. She asked questions, took notes, said someone would be out within the hour. By 8:30, a black and white cruiser pulled up at the front gate. I stepped outside and met the deputy halfway up the drive. He introduced himself as Deputy Roy Sanderson, tall, broad, and with the kind of expression that said he'd seen plenty of suburban drama, but didn't care for bullshit. "I understand you've got some unauthorized vehicles on your property," he said. "3 box trucks," I nodded. "No permission, no rental agreement, and I have reason to believe there's something inside worth looking at." I walked him around the side, unlocked the gate, and showed him the trucks. I pointed out the license plates, the chained rear door, and the laminated signs still tucked into the edge of my fence from the HOA. Roy walked around each vehicle, slowly, inspecting without touching. "You open any of them?" he asked. "Only the first one." Didn't touch anything, but I took photos. Looked like financial records. Boxes labeled with HOA contract names and internal references. That made him pause. You're saying they're using your property as an off-site archive? I'm saying someone's hiding something. And at least one anonymous source told me not to open the trucks because they're dangerous. That was the word used. Roy raised an eyebrow at that. Then he reached for his radio and requested backup. 2 more units. County Financial Crimes Unit. Civil Codes Enforcement. It escalated faster than I expected. 10 minutes later, there were 4 patrol cars parked outside my gate. One of them had a plainclothes investigator, Detective Alicia Grant, badge on her belt and steel in her voice. She took statements, asked questions, asked to see the security footage. I handed her a flash drive. She nodded, didn't say much, but the way she looked at those trucks? Like a wolf sniffing something that used to be meat. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Karen showed up. Of course she did, and not just alone. She pulled up in her Mercedes with 2 other HOA board members in tow, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. She marched up to the gate like it was still her parade route. "Excuse me," she snapped at the nearest deputy. "This is a private HOA matter. You are interfering with a community event." Roy didn't blink. "Ma'am, these trucks are on private property. This gentleman," he pointed at me, "is not a member of your HOA. You've placed vehicles here without permission. We have reports of suspicious activity, and we're investigating." Karen scoffed loudly. "You're wasting time. Those trucks contain holiday supplies, decorations, paperwork." Grant stepped forward. "Paperwork that was accessed late at night by unknown individuals and locked down with industrial chains. Ma'am, do you have rental contracts for these vehicles?" Karen hesitated. "They're community rentals. We don't have the papers with us." "Then do you have ownership documents for the contents? Anything to prove the storage is authorized?" "They're HOA property," she insisted. "Then you won't mind if we inventory everything inside." At that, Karen's face shifted. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then she took a sharp step back and ran. I swear to God, she actually ran, heels clacking on concrete, sprinting toward her car. One of the board members shouted, "Karen!" But she was already halfway to the driver's side door. That's when I acted. I pulled out my phone, opened the gate control app, and hit close. The metal arms swung shut, just as Karen's front wheels hit the threshold. She slammed on the brakes and skidded sideways into the grass. 2 deputies tackled her before she could even put the car in reverse. I stood there, arms folded, watching as they restrained her, cuffed her, and pulled her to her feet. She screamed something about legal immunity and abuse of power. But nobody was listening. Detective Grant turned to the other board members, both now looking about ready to puke. "We're going to need to speak with both of you." While they were being separated for questioning, I glanced toward the trucks. For the first time, I noticed the faint scent of old paper and mildew coming from inside the open one. Not holiday streamers, not props, just records and secrets. Roy walked over to me, pulling off his gloves. "Well," he said, "that escalated." "I warned her," I replied. "She picked the wrong garage." The morning after the arrest felt unreal. Not because I didn't believe it happened, but because the quiet was too loud. No trucks, no Karen, no HOA clipboard patrols, just the sound of birds and the occasional buzz from my phone as the media frenzy rolled in like a storm front. By 10 o'clock, 3 local news crews had reached out for statements. One even left a voicemail pretending to be just a concerned neighbor before admitting they were from Channel 6. I didn't answer any of them. I had nothing to say. Yet. Instead, I kept my eyes on the gate and my ears open. The sheriff's office had kept one patrol car parked across the street all morning. A friendly presence, as they called it. But I knew it was more than that. They wanted to make sure no one came snooping around to clean up Karen's mess, which is exactly what someone tried to do. Around noon, a white SUV rolled slowly past the house. No plates, at least none visible. Tinted windows. It made 2 slow passes before turning the corner and disappearing. I reported it. The deputy across the street logged it without blinking. By 1 p.m., it began. The HOA issued an official community statement on their Facebook group. A long-winded post full of legal hedging and passive-aggressive distancing. We are aware of recent events involving a former board member and vehicles temporarily located within the Glendale Meadows vicinity. While we cannot comment on an ongoing investigation, we regret any confusion and reiterate our commitment to transparency and community trust. Former board member. Just like that, Karen was cut loose. But she wasn't done fighting. That evening, Deputy Sanderson returned with a folder in hand and an expression that said he didn't want to be the messenger. "Tom," he said, "I need to inform you of a formal complaint." I raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "Karen Brady, through her attorney." He handed me a copy of the complaint. Allegations of theft, unauthorized access to private property, tampering with financial documents. She claimed the trucks were rented legally, and that I had broken into them and removed sensitive materials. "She says you stole HOA documents," Roy said, looking tired. "Claims you were trying to extort her with what you found." I stared at the papers, then burst out laughing. "I've got 14 hours of security footage, Sheriff. You think I tampered with anything?" "No," he said flatly. "But we've got to follow procedure. The DA won't take it seriously, but we need to record your statement again. Dot the I's, cross the T's." I nodded. "Fine. Let's do it." An hour later, I was at the station reviewing my own footage with Detective Grant. Every minute of video, from the first truck arrival to the moment Karen tried to bolt. We went frame by frame. The timestamps. The footage of me never setting foot inside the locked truck. The moments where others entered without my knowledge. The anonymous notes. The phone alerts. It was airtight. "She's desperate," Grant muttered. "You don't fabricate charges like this unless you're sinking." "Let her sink," I said. "Just don't let her drag anyone down with her." Grant tapped the edge of the desk. "That's the thing. She almost did." Then she showed me something. A printed screenshot from a traffic camera. Karen's Mercedes, the morning before the arrest. Parked outside a quiet municipal storage building. A man was loading boxes into her trunk. Grant zoomed in on the image. The man was wearing an HOA staff lanyard. She had someone help her move files out before we got involved. He came forward this morning. Said she threatened to fire him if he didn't help. I frowned. He talk? He did more than talk. He handed over digital backups. The pieces were falling fast now. One of the boxes in my garage had been marked, "Archive, do not destroy." Grant suspected it contained original records that had been deleted from HOA servers, which made my garage less of a storage space and more of a panic room. That night, the first major report aired on local news. HOA scandal unfolds. Secret financial documents found in resident's garage. I didn't watch it live. My phone buzzed too much. Friends from out of state, clients I hadn't heard from in years. Even a message from my old army buddy. "Dude, you just arrested a HOA queen. You deserve a beer and a medal." Not far off, as it would turn out. But for now, I just locked the gate and turned off the porch light. The spotlight was on me, and I didn't ask for it. But if this was what it took to burn the rot out from under their perfect lawns and pastel houses, so be it. Let them keep posting. I had hard drives, witnesses, and the truth. They scheduled the first hearing for August 3rd. By then, the trucks had been towed, the contents inventoried, and the HOA's office sealed pending investigation. The county prosecutor had officially filed charges against Karen Brady and 2 other HOA officials: financial fraud, misuse of community funds, illegal storage of private documents, obstruction of justice, and one particularly satisfying charge: false accusation under oath. I walked into the courthouse with a folder of evidence and a USB drive labeled Garage Gate Footage Final. They offered me a private conference room to wait in before I testified. I didn't pace. I didn't fidget. I just sat and reviewed the same footage I'd already memorized. Across the hall, Karen sat with her attorney, pale and stiffer than the last time I saw her. Her confident smirk was gone, replaced by the flat panic of someone who realized the cliff had no bottom. When they called me in, the courtroom was half full. Mostly reporters, a few HOA members who hadn't yet fled the sinking ship, and one face that stopped me cold. Second row. Brown hair. Business casual. Trying to disappear behind a pair of reading glasses, I recognized her instantly. She'd been there during Karen's early visits. Silent. Always holding a clipboard or typing something on a tablet. The secretary. Her name came back to me in a flash. Savannah. She caught my eye, barely nodded, then looked down. I was sworn in, took the stand, and answered every question from the prosecutor with calm precision. The footage spoke louder than I did. The time-stamped video showing the arrival of the trucks, Karen's multiple visits, her confrontation, her attempted escape, and, most importantly, the evidence that I never touched the documents until law enforcement arrived. When the prosecutor asked whether I had permission to store HOA property, I answered plainly, I told them no, repeatedly. Then came the surprise. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, we'd like to call an additional witness, Ms. Savannah Linwood. The courtroom shifted. Karen's head snapped sideways. Her lawyer looked like someone had just whispered a slur in Latin. Savannah stood, walked slowly to the stand, was sworn in, and then dropped a truth bomb that made the entire room lean forward. I worked for the Glendale Meadows HOA as administrative coordinator for 3 years, she said. I was responsible for archiving meeting notes, financial documents, and correspondence between board members. I was asked to alter records several times, to remove names, inflate vendor payments, and falsify expense reports. The defense objected. Overruled. I was also told to delete digital copies of certain internal audits. I didn't delete them. I kept backups, on my own time, on my own drives. She reached into her bag, produced a manila folder, and handed it to the bailiff. Inside, a full printout of HOA budget discrepancies, whistleblower statements, and scanned emails, several from Karen herself. One in particular, dated June 22nd, read, Keep everything out of public eyes until after the 4th. Storage arranged at Becker's place. He'll go along with it. I felt the room tilt. She forged my consent? I said aloud, before catching myself. The judge allowed it. Savannah nodded slowly. She told everyone you were on board, but I'd heard you refused. That's when I left a note in your mailbox. I hoped you'd act before it got worse. That was the final nail. After the hearing, the charges against me were dismissed outright. Karen's countersuit was thrown out with prejudice. The judge ruled the HOA had knowingly violated property laws and attempted to obstruct justice using false testimony. I was awarded $250,000 in damages from Karen personally, and another $400,000 from the HOA's insurance for emotional distress, property violation, and legal costs. The court ordered a freeze on the HOA's accounts. A county-appointed trustee took over operations. Karen was remanded into custody pending sentencing. The two other board members accepted plea deals. As I walked out of the courtroom, reporters rushed me. I kept my head down, but a few microphones caught the one line I said. I told her no. She just didn't hear it. That evening, I received a letter from the sheriff's department. Enclosed was a certificate, neatly framed and stamped with the county seal. For civic courage and contribution to public justice. Awarded to Thomas Becker. The same day, Savannah stopped by my gate. She didn't come in, just stood at the edge, holding a paper bag and a six-pack of craft beer. "I owed you more than a note," she said. "You gave me enough," I replied. She smiled faintly. "You think they'll let me testify again at sentencing?" "Oh, they'll want you front and center." And for the first time in weeks, I let the gate open. 3 months later, I hosted a party in my garage. Not just any party. This was a proper suburban victory lap. Grilled food, classic rock, folding chairs, cold beer, and the unmistakable smell of reclaimed dignity. I'd pressure washed the whole place the day before, cleared out every last trace of that weird mildew scent, and polished the epoxy floor until it practically reflected back smug satisfaction. Neighbors came, real ones. People who had avoided me during the early HOA drama were now showing up with potato salad and six-packs, awkwardly asking if I needed help setting up folding tables. Some offered half apologies wrapped in vague phrases like, "Glad it all worked out," or "Crazy how things unfolded." I let it slide. They didn't chain box trucks to their driveways, but they also didn't accuse me of theft, so we called it even. Savannah showed up late with brownies and a slightly haunted expression. She'd landed a new job at a nonprofit downtown. No HOA meetings, no board politics, just spreadsheets and calm. She stayed on the edge of the gathering, quietly sipping from a red Solo cup, while people offered her shy thanks and avoided eye contact. She didn't mind. Heroes don't always want a spotlight. Deputy Sanderson dropped by in uniform. "Just checking on the most secure garage in the county," he joked, glancing up at my new reinforced steel gate with motion-activated floodlights and a discreet "smile for the camera" sign. "You planning to store gold bars in there next?" "Only if they fit between the tax returns and the lawsuit paperwork," I said. We both laughed. It was the kind of laugh that comes after chaos. The kind you earn. At some point during the evening, someone pulled out a Bluetooth speaker, and an impromptu dance floor formed in the driveway. People danced badly. Kids chalked up the sidewalk. I grilled until the propane ran out, then passed the tongs to a teenager who'd never cooked a bratwurst before in his life. It didn't matter. Nobody was judging. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, I walked to the edge of my property and looked down the street toward the empty house where Karen used to live. It had gone up for sale a week after the trial. No one had moved in yet. The windows were dark, the lawn overgrown. Like the neighborhood had rejected her too. I didn't smile. Not exactly. But something inside me unclenched. Just as I turned to head back, someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was Ed, from 2 houses down. He held a red, white, and blue box in his hands. "Hey, Tom," he said. "We never did get to do our 4th of July thing. Want to make up for it?" I opened the box. Fireworks. Not the supermarket kind, the real kind. stuff that probably wasn't legal in 4 states. "Hell yes," I said. We set them off from the far edge of the lot, away from the party. Every blast echoed down the street like punctuation. Neighbors cheered, dogs barked, someone yelled, "Screw the HOA!" and got a round of applause. It was chaos. It was perfect. The final rocket shot high into the sky, split into 3 rings of gold, and left behind a long trail of fading sparks. I watched it disappear, then looked around at the people, talking, laughing, not pretending. Maybe this wasn't peace, but it was freedom. And in this neighborhood, that was a hell of a thing to earn.
This story is a clear reminder of how dangerous an HOA can become when its leaders believe the neighbors will stay silent. Technically, the protagonist's property lies outside the HOA's jurisdiction. Legally, he's under no obligation to follow their rules. But Karen, the HOA president, decides otherwise, first through friendly offers, then by manipulating public opinion, and finally, through outright unauthorized use of private property. The HOA's mistake here is systemic. They interpret silence as consent and politeness as weakness. This is a textbook case of soft coercion, beginning with a request for community cooperation, followed by public expressions of gratitude, and ultimately leading to de facto forced involvement, all without ever obtaining written permission. The protagonist handled the situation flawlessly. He didn't respond emotionally or escalate things with confrontation. Instead, he documented everything. Security cameras clearly marked property lines and notices to the authorities. All of it created a solid evidentiary base that became crucial during the eventual investigation. His greatest strength was legal awareness and calm execution. Especially important, once it was revealed the HOA had been using the park trucks to conceal evidence of financial misconduct. The key question is, what would you have done? Should the police have been called immediately after the first violation? How can you protect your property from pressure disguised as community initiatives? Why are people often afraid to stand up to an HOA? Most people aren't prepared to stand up to an official body, even when that body is acting unlawfully. But in moments like this, it's vital to remember your property is not a shared community resource, and defending it is not rudeness. It's your responsibility. This isn't just a neighborhood disagreement, it's a lesson. Never surrender your boundaries under the weight of social consensus. HOAs can be wrong. And when they are, someone must be willing to say a firm no and back it up.